It is really hard to predict where this whole AI thing is going, but if there is one thing that is very easily predictable, is that the job title of AI team lead is coming for American businesses. And it's definitely coming to property management, right? But right now, there's very few people that are actually operating as a AI team lead, and that's why I keep talking about Bill Davy. And finally, I'm bringing him onto the podcast to talk about what he actually does on a day-to-day, how he sees his role, what are the things that are working for him, right? Like, and just share, right? Like, because I think the last time that you heard him was basically talking to our leadership about kind of his experience, but this is just how he approaches the job of, I've called him an AI czar before, AI team lead, whatever you want to call it, right? That person that is having success managing AI agents. This is the example right here. So like how to find one, how to manage him, what he does for a living, all good things you're going to find here from my good friend, Bill Davy, who is also the keeper of Zen. Enjoy. Welcome to the Property Management Frame Breakers podcast. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez, and I am here to introduce you to the folks in the property management space that have broken the frame of what you may believe was possible. This podcast is presented by Vendoroo. It is your all-in-one AI solution for resolving your maintenance needs. Let's go. You got brought on to run maintenance for Happy Homes, and you had never worked in property management before, or right? Like, where were you before this?
So before I joined Happy Homes to help run maintenance, I was working in Lowe's Home Improvement for quite some time where, just based off of kind of the attitude that I brought with me to Happy Homes, where the idea is just be curious. So, I coming as a 27-year-old, I think when I started at Lowe's, I or 28-year-old, somewhere around there. Anyway, my knowledge of home improvement was pretty narrow. They in my interview they asked me what I knew about home improvement. And I was like, man, I know you guys sell hammers and nails, right? Got a chuckle out of the two guys interviewing me, but over the course of my time at Lowe's, I was just curious when people would ask, "Hey, where's this?" Well, what are you trying to do with that so I can understand it a little bit better? And I've always just been curious, wanting to know what people are doing or why they're trying to do something. And I just grew my base knowledge of home improvement in general, as far as, here's how you patch drywall, here's what you look for when you're painting or when you're trying to decide what color to paint, how to do it, how to go about it, and, installing water heaters. I've done it. I've installed dishwashers,
Yeah.
just through my own idle curiosity. And I think that because I've wanted to know those sorts of things, but wasn't sure how to go about doing it. And at the time when I joined Lowe's, the internet wasn't as loaded with the information. YouTube algorithms and so forth were just starting at that point, where it would guide you in the directions you were searching. I was just talking with contractors day in and day out of,
Yeah.
what are you guys trying to do? And then, being able to take that kind of information when Ron started talking to me about joining up with Happy Homes, it was, here's what I know. So when I see a work order come in, I'll be able to look at it, read it, and kind of diagnose it from the back end to say, okay, well, the tenant's reporting that
Yeah.
this is happening with their toilet. It's constantly running. Well, right off the rip, I think, okay, well, you need to replace your flapper. So let's get somebody in there that can replace the flapper to be
Yeah.
able to make that kind of change. And
Mm.
kind of just led me to getting rid of excess charges. So, to be able to say, I don't necessarily need to send a plumber to replace a flapper. If it's more heavy duty than just the flapper, then yeah, I do want a plumber there doing the work. But, a flapper you and I can do. So if I can save a little bit of money there by sending, just a handyman out there to kind of make that kind of decision and say, yeah, it's the flapper, here we go. Why not? Or, there's a dishwasher that's not working. Well, I don't want to repair it because that's a waste of a trip. Most of the repair options on dishwashers run you in excess of $400 just based off of labor alone. So why not consider replacing the dishwasher outright? Because you're already almost to the point of a brand new dishwasher, price point wise. But it's been eye opening how much I actually did learn through osmosis and through conversations with people at Lowe's, whether it's a contractor or a DIYer, about the sorts of things that they're trying to do at their home, and being able to apply that to the properties that we manage.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Man, what I hear is essentially if I'm somebody that's like hiring somebody to be my operations manager or my maintenance manager or whatnot, you can think about hiring someone that's been in the property management industry, or you can think in like first principles of just like hiring somebody who has just really good contextual knowledge of how to like troubleshoot stuff and triage things and like what it takes to like fix something inside of a home with what sounds like you probably had a good contractor network too coming from Lowe's, right? So feels like I would assume that that's what Ron was kind of thinking. And then correct me if I'm wrong, right? But he was basically just like, I want you to build out the maintenance department, or he was, like the story I tell about you is basically just like you got given, the keys to be like, go build this thing out. And you were thinking, all right, I want to build this thing out as intelligently as possible. So you spent yourself like 6 months just kind of like running it yourself. And then you went on kind of like you went on a vision quest to see what tools are out there and what's kind of like the best way to do this in an intelligent way. Is that kind of true? And can you kind of like talk me through that?
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. Because I had never ever been in property management, and then honestly had never really considered it until after Ron and I started talking, probably I want to say it was like 6 months before he actually hired me, 8 months before he hired me. I hadn't really thought about it much prior. And when he and I started talking and, got the ball kind of moving in that direction, it was like, okay, well, how would I apply what I do know? And then once I did get into the role, it was, well, here's this brand new system that I knew nothing about. AppFolio, I knew nothing about property management software, zero. So I want to say like the first 2 months, maybe even three, I was just playing around in AppFolio, and I would blanket I would just be on, like, honestly, I would just look at the people that were in the office with me, and I would be like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing over here. I'm just playing around in AppFolio to understand the ins and outs of what this software does, what this management software does for us, and how I can use it effectively and be able to make decisions or understand the information that was coming in, or how to get more information into it. So that way, as we progress through things up to the next level of service that we're offering, how to make that happen. Because if I don't fully understand something, I can't really, I don't feel comfortable trying to change it unless I fully understand it. So it was legitimately 3 months of just consistently playing inside of AppFolio and understanding what was going on. And then once I got that understanding, it was like, okay, well, how can I tweak these things? How can I create better systems and better ideas or better precursor knowledge? So that way, as these work orders flow in, instead of me searching through, 100 old work orders for a property, I'm looking at the maintenance notes to see, okay, well, HVAC has been replaced recently, so I don't, if there's an issue there, I need to go to this company to be able to have them go out and service it because it's still under warranty, and I can save money there. Or this dishwasher or washing machine was replaced within the last year, so there shouldn't be an issue there. I'm still under manufacturer warranty, so let me bring that to the attention of my repair tech, saying this is under manufacturer warranty, so please use the warranty in every case. And it just started to build from there, where the next 3 months was like, okay, well, let's keep dialing it in and dialing it in tighter and tighter. And I've gotten emails from property owners that are like, thank you so much for everything that you do. Like, you feel like it goes unnoticed, but we're noticing. We're seeing the differences that you're making within the company to be able to actually triage the issue in advance. So that way we're not spending extra money on the various service calls to get vendors out there. And the other even within vendors, like I'm constantly looking for vendors they're not niche vendors. Did I say it right? Niche. They're more broad. Most plumbers won't work with drywall. They only want to work with the plumbing, and they don't patch drywall. Well, now I've got two different issues if I have to cut into drywall, but I've got a couple vendors now that they'll handle the plumbing and they'll handle the drywall all in one shot. So when I see a quote from them, I know that encompasses start to finish turnkey operations for them. And as this system started rolling, Ron looked at me, the owner of the company, and Ron, he was like, "I want you to find something that will help make your job easier." And AppFolio offers smart maintenance, but it wasn't quite as robust as what we were looking for. So, I think I started jumping on the town halls and the webinars for AI because I don't know why. I just felt like that was kind of I felt like that was something that was actually going to start to play a role in things. And listening to the calls that Vendoroo would have, or even just seeing what like Property Melt offers or Lula. And there's another one called Happy Co. And when I saw Happy Co, I was like, that almost seems like it's meant to be Happy Homes, Happy Co. However, they do have a threshold for doors. We don't meet that threshold yet, but that ultimately that's what led me back to re-engaging with Vendoroo after the company was after Happy Homes had worked with them in the past, to be able to look at it and go, you know what, Vendoroo is going to allow me to go a la carte. I can pick the services I want, or I can pick the level of involvement I want to be able to make these sorts of determinations, and then building it out. Honestly, I felt like I was plugging a cord into my head and pumping information into Vendoroo to be able to triage the way I was looking to triage, to be able to handle some of these things. And I mean, honestly, Ron really did just say, "This is your project. Go forth and show me what you got." And I've had that feeling before, but to have somebody say to me within, the first 6 months of being in a company, to be like, "All right, look, you know what you're doing, and I want you to show what you're doing and set us up for success as we move forward." It was just extremely empowering. And, now when there's a question about, "Hey, what do we do with this?" It's like, or how do we want to approach this problem? I don't sit there and go, "Well, do I know the answer?" It's like, I'm going to find the answer. Let's find the answer, because that's what maintenance is let's find the answer to the problem.
If what Bill was looking for is what you're looking for, the ability to plug a cord into your head, put it into a AI version of you that is completely customizable to you, so it can run maintenance the way that you would want to run maintenance, or you want to plug it into your best maintenance person's head and have them download everything that they know, right? Instead of just like writing SOPs on a piece of paper that people are going to go look for, put it all into an AI. If that's what you want to do to level up your maintenance game, level up your whole team, allow them to have these 95% automation weeks like Bill is having, give Vendoroo a chance. Go to vendoroo.ai, schedule a consult, let the team teach you of like exactly how you'd be duplicating yourself into this AI to help you not just run maintenance, but to bring up the standard of maintenance around your company so that all of your clients, all of your people can have a consistent experience, because it's the AI that's doing the repetitive tasks that everybody continues to burn out and fail on. Go to vendoroo.ai, check it out. Enjoy the rest of this conversation with Bill. It's interesting, Bill, because I had Courtney Parks on the show a couple months ago, and it led into kind of like this idea of, she has someone that she's been able to promote into being like her AI team lead, and kind of like it's another kind of archetype inside of a company, like how I paint you as well. And one
Yeah.
of the things that we really stumbled into, like the show ended up being like, what's the recipe for like the perfect person to do this? And the things that came out were a curious tinkerer, right? Like
Hmm.
someone who's like generally curious, likes to tinker with things, not a requirement, but like there was also the combined thing of like not spoiled by previous property management experience, like kind of like bringing a fresh take from somewhere else. And as a manager, creating a place where someone can like fail forward and like allow them to really like go for it. And it sounds like it was a very similar cocktail in this scenario, in the Bill Davy scenario.
And I would agree with that. It definitely takes a mindset of, you just have to wonder, wonder what's possible, how far can you take it, where can you take it, and what can you get it to do.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think that has served me in this role, and honestly, like I accidentally was put into the role of being over AI just through my own curiosity, but it's also I'm skeptical. Like I look at the AI, and I think I can't remember who recently said on a newsletter, they talked about the network of AI bots that were created.
Molt book.
Yeah, Maltbook, and they created their own religion and their own chat groups that is, exclusive to being a chat bot. And I was like, that's exactly what people are afraid of.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I'm skeptical of it, but I'm still fascinated by the ability for that thought process to be created, which is ultimately why, like, when I talk about AI, I'm like, no, you don't want AI running the show. You want AI as a member of the team. And I've talked with it, and oddly enough, like my own sister, she works for a software company here in Charleston. She's now like diving into how she can apply AI at her job. And I was like, well, do you have conversations with AI? And she's, what do you mean? And I'm like, I legitimately have conversations with AI. Like I will sit down there, like if it's Gemini or ChatGPT or Vendoroo, like I refer to it by the name it's given and talk to it as though it's a human being to give that feel to it that, here we are discussing a solution, but I'm not going, robot, tell me. It's, for lack of a better analogy, I'm basically lost in space, Will Robinson with it, where I'm talking to this what I'm not a sentient being, but this thought process to be able to understand, its thought process to be able to help it guide it into my thought process, and I've talked about where when I'm working with a brand new AI system, I start off real slow and just discuss with, the issue at hand and, get through that process. But I'm also skeptical of where it might drive me. I've read and listened to a book called written by Mark Manson. I can't say the full title out loud. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. But it's a great book because you get to choose, like it basically says, you choose what you choose what you care about. Don't let other things determine what you care about. But recently, and I signed up for his newsletter, and one of the newsletters recently said, you can have a conversation with Gemini or Chat GPT or any of these chatbots all you want. And if you only tell your side of the story, it's going to agree with you 100%. So it's only getting the information you feed it. However, if you give it the full story, it's going to provide you with information and guide you knowing the full story to a
Mhm.
better result. It's going to challenge you, it's going to push you. And if we don't ask that of AI, if we just like, yo, just tell me what I want to know, it'll do that. But if you say, here's the full layout of what we're looking at, where do you think we need to go, you're going to get the better result. And that's basically what Ron told me to do with my experience and foray into AI within the company. Is it's like, okay, well, what can we do with it? Figure it out. Don't limit yourself by what we're trying to solve right now. How can we solve this further? And here's a shameless plug for Vendoroo. One of the main reasons why I really liked Vendoroo as my option was because it's not just about the maintenance section. It's also about Resiroo and Receptionist and Leasiroo that's coming up. You guys were talking about, Vendor was talking about these the added value that was going to come about just through playing with the maintenance aspect of it. And you were one of the only companies that was offering that or even considering that. Most everybody else just wants to stay locked into maintenance. And it's like, well, but if you can apply this elsewhere, why not? Just because I have a screwdriver, that doesn't mean that the only thing that screwdriver is good for is putting a screw in the wall. You take a flathead screwdriver and you can use that to pop staples out of something, or you can use it to open a paint can. Not recommended because it typically bends the can of paint. But if you know you're going to use the whole can, why not? You know, there are multiple ways to use tools to effectively get what you need done accomplished.
So if I'm somebody that's listening to this right now, our friend is hearing this conversation. What I would love for them to hear, right? Like I'm like, all right, cool. Bill's kind of told me his how he got here. We've now made the turn in the story of like, you've become this like AI team lead where you are, leveraging a bunch of different types of technology. Before we actually, I want to break down kind of like how you approach it, right? Like all that stuff. But first, I'd like to let's just talk about kind of like what you've achieved, right? So like I think if someone's listening to this, it's like, all right, why am I listening to you? Like what are you actually doing with AI? What kind of like outcomes or results? Like I know I've gotten like texts from you saying, hey, Vendoroo just automated 97% of my maintenance, or at least a text from you saying that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah, yeah. So what are the kind of like results that you've been achieving and like stuff that you've accomplished as a AI kind of like czar that you call yourself?
I think that was Ron that called me that, and I just said, okay, I'll be that. Why not?
I bit onto that one like a dog on a bone. I'm in. I'm calling you the AI czar.
Hey, that's fine with me. So, the things that I've been able to accomplish in, I just recently celebrated 1 year at Happy Homes is, I'm not having to deep dive every work order. So if 30 work orders come in, maybe out of those 30, I'm looking at five of them to try and help diagnose. But overall, the triage system that we were able to set up with you guys with Vendoroo has been able to handle the majority of the issues and been able to solve like which vendor would be the best option for each project. So that way I'm not, guiding it or telling it, putting my hands on it. Like at most with some of these work orders, it's more the estimate comes back and it's over the not to exceed limit, and I have to just get permission from the property owner, or I have to make the call right there on the spot. Over this past weekend where we had the 20-degree nights with the threats of snowfall, which we did get, less than half an inch here in Charleston. I woke up to an HVAC system that wasn't operating. It was not heating. And vendor had already gone through the process of reaching out to my emergency vendor, then reaching out to a backup, and the backup had already agreed to be there that day between 10 and 1. And I got the message, the repair was over the not to exceed limit. And I just right there on the spot said, do it. Go ahead and do it. I'll let the owners know that, hey, look, I gotta this property has to have heat. And that's where the difference is coming. Instead of me looking at every little detail of each work order, I'm able to back away and say, here's the big issues or the big numbers that I've got to look at and make sure that we're doing what we need to do. So it has opened up my time to be able to have conversations with property owners. I was on the phone with one the other day, just letting them know that don't know the full cost yet, but he's got a clogged pipe. More than likely, it's a collapsed pipe, and it's going to cost. It's going to cost. And rather than him go, okay, well, what's the estimate? It was okay. Well, if that pipe's collapsed, it's got to be fixed. And it turns out that it was impacting two of the units that he has. So we were able to solve two problems with one shot. But because I was able to go to him and say, look, this is what they're telling me. I don't have the estimate yet, but I've earned my spurs in a way to be able to say, I'm not trying to spend your money. And, anytime an owner questions me on spend, it's like, I don't want to spend a dime. And Vendoroo's been able to help me limit what we do spend, not just through the triage portion, but we're averaging like 10% of our work orders are closed without ever having to send a vendor on site. Their Vendoroo is able to triage it and send a how-to link to a how-to video to the tenants to be able to say, have you tried this? Have you tried this? And have you tried this? And one of those options typically works in those scenarios where we're able to not have to send anybody out there. And while I understand that these, excuse me, these tenants are renting from us to be able to have, not have to worry about maintenance issues like that's handled by someone else. They don't have to think about it. At the same time, I do think that we're seeing a shift in the tenant mentality of, well, if I can troubleshoot this without having to get a vendor on site to be able to correct the issues, why wouldn't I want to do that? Why wouldn't I want? Because at that point, now I don't have to think about, well, I just had, had somebody come out here and fix something for $700, 800, 6 out of the 12 months I was in this property, and the property owner might be thinking about increasing my rent. To avoid the extra charges, that kind of lets the property owner know, hey, I'm taking care of your property as though it were my own. And that's the mindset shift we're seeing, is that the tenants are starting to understand that, yes, somebody else owns the property, but if I act as though this is my property and handle it in that fashion, then I'm going to eliminate unnecessary charges and the property owner will respond with keeping the rent low. So it's that attitude and that idea of, instead of, well, we'll just send somebody. No, it's, let's solve the problem if we can. If it requires a vendor, cool. But if it doesn't, why not? And I've watched as work orders have decreased in volume throughout the year, just because they're starting to have that they're adopting that mindset, which property owners love, because now we can not spend as much money on maintenance, and they can, either pay the property off or they can save for that big dollar item: roofs, HVAC systems, appliances. Now, like, I remember getting a lot of pushback early on with appliance replacement. And when I started to show them, hey, if I spend $500 to repair this machine, you're halfway to the cost of a new machine with no warranty. Do you want to go with a new machine? And they started to see what I was asking and understanding what I was asking in that moment, because now I don't get questioned as hard about it. Like, there are still some owners that are, they don't want to spend the money, and I get it. I don't want to spend the money either, but being able to do that sort of thing and bring that value without really having to put forth a whole lot of elbow grease into it, I think has paid dividends. And again, the triage portion that is constantly being updated. Like, I just updated a triage, one of the policies we have in the system, where one of the property managers found a link for Second Nature. They're who provide our air filters and so forth for the tenants.
Mhm.
There's a quick link. So if they don't get the right air filter or their shipment doesn't show up, they can click that link and get a quick response, as opposed to having to send an email and wait for a response or reach out to their property manager to get that information. So I immediately did two things. There's a banner on every tenant portal that shows them what they should do. That link is now included in that banner. And then dropped it into Vendoroo as well. So that way, if a tenant does go ahead, they still put in the work order for it. Vendoroo is able to now give them that link and say, try this link. This should take you to a quick page to be able to report the issue and get it resolved fast.
That is you. All right. So that instance, before getting too I don't want to get too granular, but you basically, what you just described is you're watching the AI troubleshoot something, answer a certain way, and you were able to say, hey, next time that this happens, answer this way and send them this link directly so that they can resolve their own issue. And you've kind of described that you've inserted multiple YouTube links, is what I'm hearing, essentially, of like
Yeah.
how you solve something, because you're essentially training this AI the way that you would an employee, right? Like, hey, actually send people this, actually do this way, right? Like that's the story behind the story, is what you're, you talked about this idea of like you plugged into your brain, but you've spent a whole bunch of time essentially leading the agent, right? Like it's kind of like if you're someone's manager, how often you like check their work and then give them some good feedback on it.
Hmm.
You've done a lot of that.
Yeah, that's a daily process. It's reviewing, the various work orders, and not to a level that, I necessarily need to make adjustments, or that I don't trust what it's doing. Like, for simple things, I'm not going to question it too hard, because those are pretty routine issues to deal with. My doorknob's loose, or I need to have a door fixed. There's not a lot there. But on the larger issues, with an issue like, my thermostat has gone blank, or my thermostat's not responding. Okay, well, how are we handling that, and what do we need to do? And when I signed Happy Homes back up with Vendoroo, I legitimately did look at it as though my employee one is Vendoroo, and I do need to teach and train it with the mindset of, this is my employee, and it reports to me. So how do I go about handling, did it handle this issue correctly, or did it just kind of go through the motions? And that's not what we want. We want it to handle the issues with urgency, and with the idea that it's not just a button to push. There's humans involved, and we need to handle that with the empathy and the compassion that, a human would. And to be able to get it set up where it thinks along the same lines of me, and I don't ever want an AI agent or a human being to think exactly like me. There's only one me. I want different thoughts and opinions, and I'm sure the world is happy that there's only one me. But at the same time, you don't want everybody, it's the idea of mob mentality. I don't want mob mentality. I want different ideas coming in on how to do things. So that way we're having a collaborative conversation about what to do or how to handle, the situations that arise. So that way we can pluck, here's the start from this person and here's the body of the story, and then somebody else has the finish. Like that's how we're going to get better results, by having multiple layers of input and questioning it with different mindsets.
Bill, this is a weird question, but is this the type of manager you were at Lowe's? Like, is this because when I'm hearing you is somebody that when somebody works for them, like pours himself into like not just, hey, go do this and like go do your thing and don't bother me. Like it sounds like this is something that you would do if you were leading a person. Like, is this so anyway, so is this the type of manager you were at Lowe's? Is this something that like has changed inside of you because like all of a sudden you're like, oh, AI, this is how I want to do it? Like, is this kind of how you, so yeah, just throwing it
So,
out there.
yeah, it's not that weird of a question. I've always considered myself a boots on the ground manager. Like I'm not, the people that worked for me knew that there wasn't a job that I wouldn't ask them to do that I wouldn't first do myself.
Hmm.
And if I had to prove that to them, I would. And I did on many occasions. But at the same time, it was also, I don't want you coming to me with just a problem. Come to me with a problem and what you think your solution should be. And if I agree with the solution or I think the solution will work, I'm going to let you run, and we're going to see what kind of result we get. If I think that solution needs to be tweaked, we'll tweak it, but I'm not going to just blanket change it. If you come to me with a solution that's not that great and I don't think it's going to be effective, yeah, we're going to talk about it and we're going to figure out like how you came to that idea of, I need to clean this area up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm rope it off and or cordon it off and then start sweeping. Well, is there a better way to do that? Because if you're talking about sweeping when I talk about sweeping, I'm talking about cleaning up a garden center, and most garden centers at in Lowe's are quite large, and it takes a long time. So it's like, okay, well, why would you get a broom and dustpan to sweep up what is essentially half the building? Is that how you would approach that, or do you think there's a better solution on how we might be able to go about doing that? And kind of figure out what their thought process is. And it was like, okay, are you handcuffing yourself because you've been reprimanded in the past by someone else who didn't quite give you ownership of the projects you were working on? Or is this you're not sure of whether or not you should create a solution of your own? So let's figure out which issue it is and work on that.
Yeah.
Because that's what I want. I want people coming to me with solutions to problems, not problems with no solutions. And everybody's looking at, like, I think the most I've ever seen come in one day would probably be about a dozen work orders. So
Mm.
that's 12 tenants looking at me for an answer. Well, if I've got 12 residents, 12 tenants looking at me for an answer with, four employees looking at me to provide that answer, what do I need those four employees for? I want them to be able to look at three of the work orders and say, okay, I've got work order one, work order two, work order three. I think work order one and two, we can send these two different vendors out there to handle it. I'm not sure how to handle work order number three, but I've got an idea. What's the idea? Okay, you're on the right path, but let's take it here first because I think this is where the answer lies. This is where the answer is. And get them thinking along those ideas as opposed to saying, I don't know what to do with these work orders. What do I do? Well, I'm on a computer. We're both on computers right now, or Google exists. And one of the popular phrases in Lowe's, when people would ask, like an employee would ask a question, you just look at them and go, GTS, Google that shit, Google it. Get an answer that way. We're relatively the same age. To have that as a teenager or a young adult, to be able to go to your phone and just Google something, blows my mind. And I've told some stories to my parents recently where it's like, I'm glad I didn't have a camera phone back then, but that technology exists, so let's leverage it, right? And that's kind of what it's about for me is leveraging not only what exists inside our head, but the ability to grab information from various places. I just think that it's too easy not to have that kind of mindset as opposed to the mindset where it's like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Let's go find the solution. And if I need to help you down a path, I'm willing to help you down that path, but we shouldn't be going down the same path multiple times.
How does that experience of the way that you treat people in that way compare to like the way that you're treating like an AI agent? Like, is it one to one of just like you're doing the, because what I tell myself in the background is like, this makes sense of why you are inside the AI asking it, why'd you do it this way? And then you're not telling it to Google that shit. You're saying, here's the YouTube playlist that I want you to send, right? So you're showing people that is, yeah. So I'll stop there. Like, how does the experience? Because I've never done this, right? Like, I've never plugged a plug into my brain and put it so much into AI as much as I believe that you have these days. How would you compare the experience of pouring into a person doing that versus pouring into an AI doing that, good and bad?
So, the difference between pouring into AI versus pouring into a human, right off the rip is AI is going to capture probably 90-95% of what you tell it, and it's going to hold on to that information. When it comes to humans, they're going to capture maybe somewhere between 50 and 75% of the information you give it, especially if you're dealing with complex issues where there are multiple layers to it. If I try and explain to like I've got a property right now where I'm getting a second quote where there was a leak in a pipe, a shower pipe, but it was nothing that the tenants did. It was simply a screw that had been in the pipe long enough that it rusted out, fell out, and started leaking down the wall, creating an issue not only with the drain but also with the drywall. So
Oof,
now you got to, yeah. So now
sucks.
you got to cut away all the drywall,
Yeah.
fix the pipe, and then replace the drywall, mud the drywall back into place so you get a smooth wall, and then sand it, then paint it. Well, if I were to tell you how to do that, you probably about halfway through, your brain would be on overload at that point. If I were to explain that to AI, it's going to capture that information and hold on to, okay, well, step one is you got to cut away the drywall to figure out where the hole is. Then once you figure out where the hole is, you got to figure out how to fix that spot where the hole is, cut out the pipe, put in a coupling, and you're glue the coupling in place, you're good to go. But then you also have to dry the wall out. You got to dry the inside of that wall out so that way we don't have a mold moisture issue later on down the road, organic growth as we call it. But then you got to go back and you got to figure out, okay, well, if I didn't cut it out in square sections, I've got to cut away enough drywall to create a patch where I can basically take a sheet of drywall and stick it back up, screw it in, mud it in, and then sand it. So, I already see you yawning on the camera right now, and it's fine, because that's the level of it. So
Yeah.
you have to break it down for people into bite-sized pieces. Whereas, for AI, I can describe the process outright. And if that AI is actually connected to the internet or like connected to resources, which most of them are, it will start to source information out of those sources and bring them into the conversation and be like, well, there's this drywall clip that we could also use, which I know about because I've used them. But that's the idea, whereas with a person, you might, if they've never done it, you're going to have to walk them through step by step to be able to have them understand it. If you were to try and tell me right now how to build content for a podcast, my eyes would glaze over probably about 10-15 minutes into the conversation because there's so much to it. But at the same time, if you were to talk to an AI agent, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, whomever, and say, teach me how to build content. It's going to give you that bullet point breakdown and say, do you want to start with step one? And it'll teach you from there as opposed to, okay, we're going to start with creating the ideas of what you want to talk about on your content in your content to be able to make that content happen.
Bill, what I'm hearing from you is something I think is fascinating that I hadn't put together. And it's the idea that I know how the vendor agent works, right? Like it's like I know that you're in there with PMRoo, you're asking it what it's doing, and when it does something and you want to change it, you're like, hey, next time do it like this. What I'm hearing from you is that it sounds like you're chatting either with Gemini or GPT about, hey, I want to tell my Vendoroo agent this thing. How would you do the best thing?
Yeah.
And then that's what's suggesting the YouTube clip and all this other stuff. Is that what you're doing, man? Describe to me that process, man. Like I'm seeing like the Bill Davy school of like how you train your AI agent unfolding in front of my eyes.
Absolutely. So like I think I can't see my full screen right now, but I think I have like five different Gemini windows open. We're on a Google Suite of the Google Suite package,
Mm-hmm.
which is awesome. So like I can it's learning about happy homes, it's learning about maintenance within happy homes, and it's remembering those things to be able to bring them into the conversations. But I've got like 4 or 5 Gemini windows open and then or tabs open, and then I've got like 3 other windows open where I've got other Gemini conversations, and it's like, okay, this is what's presenting at the property. I have not seen this before. Tell me what you see here. And it will search the internet. And part of like when we were the little backstory, when we were looking at which AI agent we wanted to go with, ChatGPT or Gemini, obviously Gemini was the preferred option just because we have the Google Suite. But it was like I researched the search engines to find out, or the AI engines to figure out what they're connected to and how they're connected. Well, Gemini is connected to Google, which Google's almost everywhere. ChatGPT has to have new information loaded into it yearly. So Gemini has on the fly information. ChatGPT does not. It's working with dated information, and as a result of what I've figured out within Gemini, I've been able to ask it trick questions. Always try and trick the AI. I was listening to this book on tape about artificial intelligence, and it was written in the spring of 2025, and I'm listening to it in the fall of 2025 about, it said, ask your chat engine about the climate summit of 2025 in Antarctica. So I popped that question into Gemini just to see if Gemini could be tricked, and and I refer to Gemini as a female. She came back with there was no such climate summit in Antarctica in 2025. So you got to test it and you got to see if you can confuse it to be able to know what kind of parameters you need to work with when you're feeding information into it. So to be able to go to Gemini and say, okay, I've got a tenant that is reporting that their toilet is backed up and it's not flushing. And my tenant immediately to next to that property is also reporting a similar issue. However, they're saying the water is bubbling back up through their toilet. What do you or through their shower, excuse me. What do you think the best possible what do you think the problem is? Probably a clogged pipe just beyond the second unit where it's bubbling up into the shower. So now we know we need to start in that unit and figure out from there where the blockage is. And I'm speaking about a specific spot in this scenario because it turned out that the 2 units were connected, and the clog was just outside of unit B, and we had to dig up concrete to be able to get to it. That was
So
what that.
are you asking Google how to communicate this with someone, or are you like, do you go to that when it comes to your edge cases, or are you all the time when you're just kind of like in the space, you're just always chatting with it so that it knows what it's doing and you're training it? And how does that communicate back to vendor? Are you like copy pasting messages from them to each other?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I copy paste into from Gemini into Vendoroo when I get the opportunity to,
Mhm.
and when it seems necessary to be able to update information, or as I come across different problems where when it's like, what do we do here? Let's figure it out. Let's
Yeah.
figure out what we do need to do here, and then shape our policy around that, so that way I can feed that information into Vendoroo to be able to solve the problem on the fly, or to be able to troubleshoot that problem in the future. So it's not one of those, hold on, I know we had this, like, I think actually I was at a property today, which is why I've got my cap on, because we were dealing with a not pleasant situation. But I remember, as I was on the property, I'm like, okay, I think this is why the property owner's confused. They have 2 different properties with us. One had the part of the HVAC replaced under warranty, and then the other I don't have any information on that HVAC. So they're talking about a warranty for that HVAC. And I'm like, okay, I think they have the two properties a little bit mixed up. And they're thinking they've got a warranty at the other one, but it was this one that the warranty existed. And I was able to jog my memory, but by having that information or, using that kind of idea where it's like Gemini remembers or Vendoroo remembers, they're able to go back. I'm able to go back and say, okay, nope, nope, this is where it exists. And like the Chrome extension within Vendoroo is invaluable for that sort of information because I can ask the questions about the current work order that is in process and then go, well, wait a minute. Vendor handled this issue 3 months ago. Why are we seeing it again? And go back, pull that work order out and go, okay, well, then this is a larger issue than just a dryer belt. This is the dryer is starting to die.
Kind of how you started here of like what you do is brings me down like another rabbit hole I'd like to go down is the idea that when I came to visit you, and like now in the stories that you tell, I don't hear you telling a lot of stories of like stuff that you have to get done as much as you're telling me stories of I'm looking deeper into this scenario that's a complicated scenario, right? Like I guess my question is if you have like describe your day to day, right? Like I'd like to paint the picture of what the work is if we're reimagining maintenance departments as AI first, and you can have an AI maintenance coordinator. What is the role of like we've talked about you as an AI team lead because that's what you've evolved to, but what is the role of the humans in maintenance once like describe to me the day to day of maintenance now that's AI first, where it's like the role of the AI is doing this while humans are doing that based on like what you fill your days with when it comes to maintenance.
So the role now for me primarily revolves around vendor response time, tenant responses, and owner responses. So it's I'm no longer dealing with the problem that is not human. I'm dealing with the human aspect of it. Are my vendors communicating to the tenants on time? Are we getting that issue resolved in an expedited fashion where needed? And are we communicating with the owners to let them know what's going on just so that way when an issue arises at their property, how do they handle it, what do they do, or do they want to know, how much do they want to know? I've got like three or four property owners that have told me they don't want to hear from me, they don't want to know anything, they just want to get their money each month, and I'm like, hey, no problem, got I'll just reach out to you on the big ticket items or give you a heads up. And are the tenants happy with particular vendors? Do they have preferences when it comes to vendors? I've got a couple guys that, the vent, like if an issue arises, they're like, send this guy, please. We like this guy. So you're able to tailor what they want. If you've had work done at your own house, you know who you want to work with. Well, the tenants don't really have that option. But if I'm not trying to diagnose what the problem is, I do have that option. We do have that option now to be able to say, okay, well, it looks like I got three or four different things that need to happen at this property, and I don't want to inconvenience tenants any more than I have to. So if you could hire somebody that for your house that could do one-stop shop, fix a toilet, repair drywall, and replace a ceiling fan. Wouldn't you want to hire that person over bringing in an electrician to swap out a ceiling fan, bringing in a drywall guy to fix the drywall, and a plumber to come in and fix a toilet? We're able to go out and find those people. Or, I think one of the things I talked with you about was I got hammered over the summer on HVAC issues, and I didn't have enough HVAC vendors to be able to handle that. Well, I've boosted my list up to about 8 or 9 HVAC vendors. And with the recent cold snap, when I got hired on with Vendoroo, when I got hired on with Happy Homes a year ago, the very first week or second week I was with Happy Homes, we had snow and we had bone chilling temperatures. And the number of work orders I saw coming through for HVAC systems not functioning quite as well. What do? It was white knuckle time, man. I was gripping the steering wheel tight, trying to drive us through that snowstorm. But now this time around, I had one HVAC issue come through. One. So inherently, maintenance is a reactive department. And my goal each and every day is to get to the point where, yes, we're still going to have to react and attempt to be proactive in various ways, but also keep it flat, keep it calm, keep it neutral. You talk about my title as AI czar. The other title I have is Keeper of Zen. And the whole idea is, yeah, problems are going to happen every day, but it's not so much the problem that's the issue, it's our response to the issue that matters more. So how do we keep things steady, even keeled, so that way as the problems arise, we're handling them. And the mental image that always pops into my head is, honestly, even though I'm a Cubs fan, I think about Ozzie Smith as a shortstop for the St. Louis Cardinals. He was a slick fielding infielder, and he never looked under pressure when he was making plays. He just fielded the ball cleanly and then made the throw. And that's all we're trying to do day in and day out with each maintenance issue is field the issue and get it solved cleanly. So that way we've got it handled. The tenants don't have this feeling of paranoia that we're not taking care of it or we're not taking it seriously. No, we're taking it seriously and we're trying to handle it as level as possible without ringing alarm bells.
The keeper of Zen, my friend. I love that nickname, man. So I would say if we're breaking down essentially what it takes to do this well, to be a great team lead, to be an AI czar, like we talked about like the three qualities ahead of time with the curiosity and all that. But if I was to summarize the stuff that you've been saying, it's treating the AI very much the way that a good leader would treat a human, which is consistently being in dialogue with it and checking in on it and giving it feedback and knowing that you took it another level of like where you also use your whatever your generative AI, LLM of choices, for you it's Gemini, for other people it might be ChatGPT or Claude, but to like be when you are finding the parts that you need to like interface with the agentic AI, you're like jamming with your other AI to like figure out the best way to give it feedback, which is a whole nother loop that I hadn't opened. And then it's just basically as you're doing that more and more, your job interpersonally, now that that's how you manage the machines, but when you manage people, it's really about being the Zen keeper, right? Like you're looking for, you mentioned a handful of different times how you're looking of how to like make the person feel like they're getting this like boutique experience essentially
Yeah.
by giving them what they want, whether it's a renter getting to like have the vendor that they want come by, whether it's an owner that like you're able to make decisions for because they have your trust and you can really be there, and it's like an overall kind of like going from this like reactionary, anxious kind of like maintenance motion to this like Zen Ozzie Smith keeper of like keeper of the peace motion where everything feels smooth on the outside because you're kind of playing offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I've looked to do in this role. And as we've started adopting AI a little bit more here and there, is to be able to put processes and procedures in place that allow the workflow to happen. I won't say perfectly because we don't live in a perfect society or a perfect world, and I'm certainly not perfect, but to be able to have, if you're looking at having a percentage of, 90% of your work orders go off without a hitch, that's a pretty good percentage. Now, how much higher can we get it? So let's use the tools to see if we can't leverage different ideas or different avenues to be able to push that up to a 95 or a 98. Don't ever be, I don't ever want to be satisfied with, the status quo. And if the status quo for us is 95, how do we get 96? And if that becomes the status quo, how do we get 97? Let's keep climbing for the next level so that way as we grow and as we improve, we can continue that process to be able to make owners feel at ease, knowing that, when they sign over their property for Happy Homes to manage, let what do we do? How do we do things? If an owner wants to have a conversation with me about, the process behind maintenance, I'm happy. If they want to know how we came to a determination about a particular maintenance order and why the charge was what it was, let's have the conversation. I do not mind at all because I've got the time to have a like again have another conversation with a vendor about, okay, well, you did this. Tell me what led you to that decision. How did you come to that determination? Because I know I'm going to get questioned on it. Okay, I see what you were thinking. Great. I'm on board with your decision because I know that you just provided me with an explanation that tells me exactly what I needed to know to be able to explain it to the property owner to say, this is why we did X, Y, and Z. So now this is no longer an issue for you.
Good stuff, man. I like it. I like it. I like this is everything I wanted. I wanted to just like dive into your brain and figure out like what you're doing and how you go about it. And it's confirmed a lot of things, but it's also opened up my mind to a couple new things. Like I really do want to, I honestly feel like I need to figure out how to like create the like how Bill trains his agents like YouTube series kind of thing. Like I feel like that's a project in our future, man.
Let's do it.
Anything else that we haven't hit on that you think is like key to your success in being an AI team lead that's worth diving into?
I mean, honestly, like I think one thing that, I've alluded to a few different times, but we haven't really jumped into that heavily is knowing that, Ron, the owner of the company and he's the chief of happiness or, the director of happiness, he has given me the leash and the rope to run with ideas. And if I come to him with an idea, it's not, okay, well, what are you going to do with it? It's like he jumps into the dream with me or the idea with me, or, vice versa. He'll bring an idea to me and it's like, okay, well, let's figure this out and let me do some prelim stuff on this to figure out what we need to do to be able to make that that possibility happen. It's empowering your employee, your AIs are, or whatever moniker you want to give them,
We're,
or
we're going with AI team lead. I think it's more like
okay.
digestible for people, you know?
Your AI team lead is allow them the ability to believe and feel backed up in that way where you can go out and explore the different options that do exist within that realm, because it was go play with Gemini, go play with Chat GPT, go play with Claude, go play with Copilot from Microsoft and see which one you like, and then look at what your company currently uses. In our scenario, it was Gemini, but if you're Microsoft based, you might prefer Copilot at that point because you've already got that suite of Microsoft items to use. So figure out how you can apply Copilot within the Microsoft world to what you're doing, or figure out how ChatGPT can help you create conversation talking points with property owners. That's the idea, and knowing that no matter where you end up, it's not so much where you end up, but it's the journey that you're taking in that moment to be able to get to that end point. And it's never really the end point. It's just a stop along the way. I go back to when I was trying to figure out what maintenance company I wanted to work with. I think I talked to Vendoroo right away, but then I also talked to Property Meld and then Happy Co. and then Lula. And then there might have been two or three others out there where they were all stops along the way to the journey. And I was able to take what I learned about each individual one and think about how it would apply to Happy Homes. And I was never under pressure to make a decision, but the decision was mine to make and I knew it. And when I made the call to go with Vendoroo, I knew I had the backing of my boss, of the owner of the company to say, if you think this is what's right, then let's go forth and see how it runs. And if it doesn't work, then we pull back and we pivot to something else. And it's being willing to pivot. Like I will I will be the first to tell you I have not been great at pivoting most of my life. Like I'm not a nimble person when it comes to thought processes. But being in this role and in this last year, I have realized, or I have figured out ways to be able to pivot off of an idea into a different direction. Because just because this idea doesn't really work here doesn't mean it's something to throw away and trash. It's still something that could be viable in the future, but it's not where we are currently. So pivot to something that works currently, but with the information you just got off of this idea that doesn't work, you now have solutions for what will work.
Yep. I like it, man. The importance of having a leader that is not afraid to let you fail forward in today's rapidly moving AI environment cannot be understated. Like the ones that are, I don't know, I don't want to make a carte blanche statement on the other, like of the opposite of that type of leader, but it's definitely an advantage today, right? Like with all the stuff with how quickly you can learn and evolve stuff.
Well, and I think back to the first summit I was on with you and Jay Barubi, where you guys were talking about Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Blockbuster is a myth to kids these days. They don't know about making it a Blockbuster night. Now it's, a Netflix and chill. But even within Netflix, I remember when Netflix was delivering DVDs to your door and they evolved. That's the idea is it's like, hey, I got this idea. Maybe we ought to try this. Where is the harm in trying something? Because if you don't try, then you're never gonna know. And like that again, that's having a leader that is willing to let you have that opportunity to try. And you can't just blindly try things. You've got to have idea, like a focused idea within that, but knowing that you won't be judged solely based off of off of whether or not it succeeds or fails, but also knowing that the failure may actually lead you forward. And I'm because of my age, I'm going to go back to the idea of the movie Real Genius, where they're building the laser that needs to shoot at like a certain level, and the one guy sabotages it, and Val Kilmer has this brilliant idea to use a super cooled glaze to be able to improve the power of the laser, and he exponentially increases the power of that laser. That came through failure. Granted, it was sabotage failure, but it led him to the next idea, and that's kind of the goal, right? Let's get to the let's figure out the next idea or the next possible solution to see if it works.
Well said, man. Out here throwing early Val Kilmer work.
I mean, it's,
I'm a
I'm a
top
bit
secret guy myself.
Top Secret is a good one. I'm a fan of the 80s movies as well as the 80s music.
I love it, man. I love it. Man, I love hanging out with you, man. I love how zen you are and your long form storytelling. And I'm glad we finally got to do this. I feel like this is long overdue. We had you obviously like talk to our leadership and stuff like that, but a podcast about the unique genius behind Bill Davy is something that it feels like under long overdue with how much I talk about you, man. You definitely showed up and delivered. I appreciate it.
Is it genius, or is it, God, I'm forgetting the actor's name.
It's an
Is it
idiot
is it
sandwich.
I mean, is it young Frankenstein, mad scientist though?
Mad scientist. Yeah, it is. There's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that. It's alive.
Oh, I mean, I remember in that fireside chat with the leadership from Vendoroo, it was like, well, what made you think? What made you want to go down that avenue? And it was being just a little bit willing to take the leap, to be crazy enough to take the jump. And it was calculated, but it was also, I remember, I can tell you this and I can end with this one, but I can tell you without any doubt that when I finally settled on using Vendoroo for our option, and the AI option, the AI that was offered, it like I had this moment of panic as I said, yes, this is who we want to go with. But I also had this moment of exhilaration that I knew that I was going in a direction that ultimately would lead us somewhere. I just wasn't sure where yet, but I knew that this was part of the journey. And I wanted to take that step. I wanted to jump from the cliff to the other side to see what happens. And if you don't have that willingness or the nerve to try and make that decision, then this isn't your decision to make. It's someone else's decision to make.